With the release of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, we've got the release of a new mini game that they have developed called Queen's Blood. This mini game I will go through and explain how it works in a moment, but has inspired me to do a board game design challenge based on this game. One of the interesting things that when it first happened, people posted about it in one of the board game groups that I'm in, and someone in the comments was like, I already have a physical prototype of this, so I can see how it plays in real life. And inspired by that, I'm going to be doing something similar. But first, let's have a look at the game and how it works, and then what we're going to be doing from there. First thing is this is a 3-lane control strategy game similar to either Marvel's Snap, which you've seen a bunch on this channel, or Gwent, where you are trying to score the most as you can in certain lanes. The scoring mechanism for this is slightly different. In Marvel's Snap, having more big number in one lane than the other person means that you have basically won that lane. And then you just need to win 2 out of 3 lanes. In this game, a lane that you've won contributes a number of coins to your victory condition, and you need to have more coins than the other person. So that person could really win one lane by a great amount, and then they would still win overall because they might have more coins than you in total, which is an interesting change. And gives you more strategic options if you are way over invested in one place. Then we've got the actual cards and placement of the cards themselves. So the first thing that you might notice is there is pawns on the board. The pawns are a growing resource over time that allow you to play cards. Similar to Magic the Gathering, where what cards you can play are gated based on the resources that you have. This is similar. However, you can only play 1 card per turn, and based on the grid pattern on the card, it will add pawns to the board based on that pattern, and that will increase or put new pawns onto the board. And then how you play cards is based on the pawn cost on the card. So for example, if you have something that has 2, you must have 2 in that particular space to be able to play that card. And what you're trying to do is get as much power into that lane as you can, which is the number in the top right of the card. Each space obviously cannot be occupied by more than 1 card, so you're also vying for spatial control as well as more power in a specific spot. So if you have a really big card, that doesn't necessarily need to take up more space. In the demo so far, we have only seen enough to know what the basic gameplay is like, but the goal is to have a look and look at a spatial control type game just like this, which I guess we might as well move on to the next bit. My plan is to try and take the core mechanics of this game and introduce something from a game called Taluva. Taluva is a 2-player strategy game where you're building up settlements amongst a growing island because of a volcano. And the higher the tiles, the more advantage you are able to what structures you can play. And the goal is to take a little bit from both of these games so that we can build something new. I've not prepared anything for this. I literally hit record and to then explain the things I was going to do without actually knowing what it was. So everything I'll be building will be live, and you can kind of see my process and how it all comes together. But having an understanding of how each game works, I know kind of what direction I want these things to go in, and we're going to be trying to be building something fresh, something new that uses these ideas. Here is a small segment of the Taluva rulebook, which designates the different placing restrictions and how you're going to be building your settlements. This is one of the things that I wanted to incorporate into the Queen's Blood idea, to build in that direction, because I think that the way that they have pawns and manage that is a little bit too simple if it was to become a board game, right, instead of a mini game. In the same way that we saw with Gwent, right? Gwent in the mini game in The Witcher 3 was much scaled back than what we saw in the actual Gwent digital release. So there is an expectation in this job that there will be room for adding mechanics and room for expanding on things And Tuluva came to my mind because I think it has a rather interesting way of interacting. So, let's just run through it, right? So if you are to build a hut, you're starting a new settlement, which means that you'll be placing something that doesn't have anything adjacent to it, which would really, on the Queen's Blood board, would really only ever be the first turn. Then the second option is building a tower. Now the tower requires a certain height of the board, which I'm not sure if we want to do verticality or not, but if we do, this is a good idea to stick with. The third option is building a temple. So to build a temple, it requires 3 hex spaces that have your buildings on it, which is very similar to Queen's Blood, where it's like, okay, I must have this many guys in the spot for me to be able to play my card. And then the final one, which is the big expansion, where you name a terrain type and then you add settlements, add huts to each of the adjacent hexes of that terrain type. So in the example you can see on the screen, they selected jungle. There's 3 adjacent jungle fields to the one particular settlement, and they get to add a hut into each of them, but because of the verticality, the higher ones get more huts. So I think this is really good base, and you can kind of start to see how these 2 things are going to be coming together. But let's get Photoshop cranking and let's start looking at some ideas. So the first thing we do is open up our poker sized canvas that is 825 by 1125 pixels, which is the standard poker size and often the size taken when submitting to places like the Gamecraft when it comes to building a prototype. If we have a look at the Queen's Blood cards, there's 3 things. There's 3 pieces of information. I'm just going to go ahead and scribble them on here horribly, and then we'll come back and fix it later. The first one is the pawn cost. The second one is the power, and then the third thing is the grid coordinates. And like this might be colored in or something. And then they have the character art of a guy. This one has a sword. Oh, scissors. Looks more like a pair of scissors. Whatever. That's not important. These are the defining characteristics of the card. When the card is played, the thing at the bottom, this little pattern, is where the pawns are distributed. In Tuluva, you are selecting a landscape type, and that is how the huts are distributed. I am unsure presently if I want to add landscape types to the board and add any kind of verticality. Because actually if we create a new canvas, whatever size, doesn't matter, this is my screen size, and we just put in some hexes, right? It's a fantastic drawing. Then we could have cards. I just cannot draw it all. That's a hex, I promise. If we put in cards that change the landscape type, I think that's a tree. This can be a volcano. This can be a field. I'm a designer, not an illustrator. If you have cards that change the terrain type that you could play maybe in addition to or instead of one of your guys, and change the terrain type so that you can then interact with the terrain types to your preference, that could potentially be our way. Because I'm still not sure if I want to have the hex setup that Tuluva has, or the, what is it, 3x5, 3x6 grid that Queen's Blood has. Both of them have different options, right? The 3x6 grid that Queen's Blood have guarantees a game size. I think that's fine. I think that's probably to my preference. So if I create a new layer here, let's just clear this out. I thought it was probably a better way to do that, but there you go, paint bucket. Let's just fix this hole I've left. If we have the grid, it's like 2, 3, 4, 5. Try not to draw over my head too much. I really could have done this all along, but that's fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is super messy, but this is just to give you an idea of the size. And if each of these is randomly assigned a terrain type, you can have like a rolling mat or something that like defines it at the start of the game. And then you have cards that determine a terrain type. So that I guess it would have to be for free. I think spending a whole turn changing a terrain type seems lame. But being able to play them all. And one of the other things that I think Queen's Blood is sorely missing is the ability to just march your soldiers somewhere. Because if you have 2 pawns in a location that you've spawned from playing other cards, and you place them and they cost 1 in there, you've wasted a guy, you've wasted a resource basically. And there's no like mitigation for that. That's just bad play. And it's probably would be cooler if you could do that and then bump a guy forward or bump a guy into a direction, or actually have soldiers on the map that march around and stuff. So I think that is kind of something that I want to be able to do. But like if this is our volcano biome and you have 3 dudes here, and then you play a thing, you need to be able to move the guys, right? So let's create a new one, big square. What we're going to do is, zoom in a little bit. Yeah, let's have it in a readable color. And just like a normal font. There we go. 3 actions possible. I think the 3 actions should be move soldiers, play terrain types, play a soldier. I don't know what they would want to be called just yet, but moving existing soldiers, playing new terrain cards, and playing soldier cards. So if playing terrain type cards is free, we want some kind of hand size economy. So we could have playing soldier cards to generate card draw instead of moving soldiers or generating soldiers. And also, what's the goal here? Are we playing like a 3-lane strategy thing? Tuluva has a complicated point scoring system about the best structure you can build. So we could have something like that. We could have it be more an area type thing. Like for example, King Domino has a scoring pattern where it's like the greater the size of the terrain. So it could be something like your terrain type is fixed to like it can't be changed if you have guys on it. You can't change it if you have cards on it. Which means that if you have a big terrain, you have control of the big terrain, then that's to your advantage, perhaps. So over here, I'm going to start a components list. 2x team soldiers, 2x decks of cards. How many terrain types do you want is a great question. If there is 3x16 grid, that means there is 18 things in total. I think having 3 terrain types and having each player having 3 cards of each terrain type works really nicely, because then there's 18 spots and each player has 9 cards to change each location potentially once. Yeah, if each player doesn't overlap at all. So 3. know that doesn't make any sense right now, but it's something. And then we need the like actual soldier cards, of which we have not really defined yet. So if the deck, let's quickly define some terrain types. So let's say plains, jungle, swamp. Great Magic the Gathering card typings. And so it's just like define one player's deck, right? Because we know we have 9 cards in it. We don't want that to be half of the cards available. We want it to be about a third, right? So we want about 27 cards per person, which means it is 54 cards in total in the deck, which is the same number of poker cards as a standard playing deck of cards, which means it's not going to be extra expensive for you to manufacture. Genius. Now I remember why I do this for a living. So we want 18 soldier cards, which we could do a similar distribution. So we do like 6 basic soldier, which is 1/3, and then we do 4 advanced soldier. Then let's do some structures, right? So that's this is all of our available cards. Basic structure, advanced structure. I can't type today. Military structure, monument. So if this is our deck, which is 27 cards, we have a 1 in 3 chance of drawing a terrain. We have a slightly worse chance of drawing basic soldier. 10 of the cards are soldiers generally, which is roughly 1 in 3. So you're guaranteed to have a 2 soldier cards, basically, if you have a 7 card hand. Please don't do maths on my channel. It's sort of correct. It's pretty close. And then we have some different structure types here. So building out a lot of the component stuff helps me. I realize you probably can't see that. Let me move this over. Building out a lot of this stuff helps me design what the rules are going to be, because if I know kind of generally what I want to have in there, then I can figure out how it's going to interact with the other cards and other things. So like with my 3 actions, I know what cards I'm going to need in the deck. And so it's like moving soldiers is not a card played thing, which makes it a little bit complicated, right? Because if that does not require playing a card, how do I manage the resources required for that? Maybe it's just like once per turn. Once, and then playing terrain cards, they're all going to cost 0. And then we'll get to the advanced stuff and how they work in a second. Back to our card. Okay, I've just spent a little bit of time fiddling around, and now we have some terrain cards. So a few things to notice here from the blank canvas I had a second ago. We have a nice little wooden border type thing. I have a whole bunch of asset packs. Itch.io is a fantastic place to get them. It's not what I would ever use for a finished product most of the time, but they're fantastic for prototypes, especially getting it to a spot where it kind of looks like what you want it to do. For you to show the artist, go, oh, this is kind of what I want. And so this border and also this icon at the top right is from packs like that. They're most commonly used for video games, but there's a lot of card games that are video games, so finding card borders and stuff like that isn't too hard. But we've got that, and we've got our numbered icon, so I can just use my thing over here on the right to change which number it's going to be. And this is going to be the Yeah, thanks. Going to be the power, maybe, or the cost or something. My original thought was the cost because I want the terrain cards to cost nothing. Then that's what this is going to be like. So I'll go through and add titles and stuff to them, but I've got 3 different types. We've got the plains, we've got the jungle, we've got the swamp. And these pictures I've just taken off Free Pick, which is a stock photo website that I use. Again, only ever for photo time, so I don't really muck around with them any other time. And so we've got our terrain cards. So I would be setting up a, was it 9, 18 in total of these in a print sheet. And then we have to go and make the other cards. So probably going to be using the same border, going to be using the same icons, but I need to figure out stuff like cuss and then what it does when you actually play it. These are just going to be changing the default terrains into something new and different. So here's how the game works so far. You will start off on your side of the board with 3, I guess, meeples to match Queen's Blood, which has 1 pawn in each spot and dictates where you can play a guide there. Then you can use your 3 actions, which is play terrain cards, play soldier cards, build structures, which is the same as the soldier cards, or move your guys. So in this case, we're going to move this guy over 1 space. And now because he's here, that gives us the ability to play a terrain card to change this to jungle. We're just going to assume for the sake of argument this was a plains before. And if this is now a jungle and one of the adjacent spaces is a jungle, that's going to give the green player an advantage over being able to play characters out into adjacent areas. So now I've created an example of what the game board might look like with some existing terrains on there for you to potentially change and match up. As you can see, it's not like perfectly randomized. I would maybe need to create more terrain types for it and make it a bit better. But placing down something that is going to make a greater contiguous line of a terrain type is going to give you an advantage when you are placing stuff. Based on the Tuluva placement pattern, when you place a guy down, everything in that shared terrain will get 1 guy. So the last thing left to do is to determine what our different card types are going to be doing, potentially dictating what the victory conditions and stuff will be. So first thing, basic soldier, advanced soldier. Basically all of the cards in Queen's Blood determine deployment of pawns, which then determine the deployment of the cards. With this, I think the idea in what we're doing so far is to try and develop an army force. And I think either the military structure or the monument should be a victory condition type. So if the military structure is a combat victory type, then when you play the military structure, you can start attacking and defeating enemy soldiers. But with the monument, you're more peaceful. You do not need to win combats. You need to build more buildings or something. So we need to find out what these things are going to do. So basic soldier should cost essentially 0, maybe. Requires 1 meeple. That's the meeple symbol. Deploy 1 and 1 in each adjacent shared biome. So if I'm deploying into the plains, I'm deploying 1 guy into each adjacent plains. Which can create a lot of dudes. So maybe this, let's cut this. That might be too powerful. I've got to make a bit more space here. There we go. So basic soldier is going to do something similar, except run in an adjacent shared biome. So basic soldier gives you one guy and cost one guy, so that doesn't change, but it gives you an additional guy in an adjacent shared biome. Advanced soldier gives you one in all adjacent shared biomes, which is a bit stronger. And there's only 4 advanced soldiers, and it requires 2. So you would have had to have played a basic soldier or moved one, right? Because you can just move your guys. So if you move them so they overlap, you would have a 2. You can play the advanced soldier and you can deploy and get a bunch of guys. Probably mathematically 6 says it's the greatest, but the distribution of terrain says that's unlikely. I think 4 would be like the best possible outcome. And that's probably requiring you to have a terrain card or 2 of the same type. Okay, then we have basic structure. So to build structures in Tuluva, like not the tower, the other one, it requires a 3 captured biomes, hex types. For the sake of this, I'm just going to say biomes, it's easier. Requires, that's a percentage symbol. Again, I can't spell. 3 captured adjacent biomes. 3 captured adjacent shared biomes. So 3 planes that are touching, and you have a guy in each of them, allows you to play a basic structure. What does a basic structure do? Well, it scores points. Probably should do something greater than that. We'll come to that, I guess. Let's make a bit more space. Okay. I like the soldier deployment so far. Let's say 5. I might have to change this. That's fine. Military structure is going to require 5 dudes. Moving your men into occupied spaces, so enemy occupied spaces, maybe better to clarify there. Enemy occupied spaces creates combat. And then it should be like winning a certain amount of combats wins a game, or winning combats scores you victory points, and that might just be a faster way to get there. There's currently no way to defend against combat. We could make it that the structures are impassable terrain. Enemy. Okay. Impassable to foes. So if you don't want to die to combat, build a wall, basically. Seems easy enough. Should additionally do something else, like maybe draw cards. Just once or every time is the thing I'm thinking about, because basic structure drawing once, basic structure drawing every turn. Let's make it plus draw 1. So this draws 2 cards now. What if it was draw 2, discard 1, and then plus 1 regular draw? getting a lot of stuff happening here. Let me move this a little bit over. Okay. Advanced structures are impossible. Basic structures, scores points, draws extra cards. Now, monument. If there's 27 cards in your deck, you start with 7 cards in your hand, there's 20 cards in your deck. If you drawing 1 card every turn, that's 20 cards to have no cards left. It's 20 turns. Playing a advanced structure is +3, and then every turn becomes 2. So that would be 17 turns, something like 14 turns. And there's only, what, 2 advanced structures and 2 basic structures. So maybe we do this every turn. And then basic structure has discard a terrain, draw 2 cards. And the monument victory condition requires 4. And then we would have it so that structures can be destroyed through combat, same as units, but this is kind of what we are looking at. I really have messed this up, but it's okay. Let's just scroll down a bit. So you either build a military structure after you've spent time settling. You can't move into enemy occupied territories unless if you have a military structure. Winning a certain number of combats or earns you points. Playing certain buildings scores you points. Having a certain number of controlled terrain things should score you points. And then the monument can just win you the game on the spot if you meet its condition. So that's kind of how I feel like the game should be. There's a lot more moving things around, a lot more strategy. There's a lot more interacting with the different terrain like Toluva does. And there's a lot more building your army and seeing your settlement kind of grow like Toluva does. In Queen's Blood, it's much more like a very crowded chess game. Like I'm really only going to play 6 cards, and so I need to just kind of pick the best one and put it in that spot. I wanted to make something inspired by that, but had a bit more tactical movement of your different things. This is probably not perfect, but this is enough to prototype, test, refine. I'm not going to be able to make something perfect on my first run through. I'm not going to be able to make something perfect just based on some ideas. But building it out, testing the prototype is going to teach me the things that I need to fix. Getting the good feedback is going to tell me what parts are fun, what parts are not fun. And then go from refining there to making a fully fleshed out game. And then, you know, maybe I will have something cool at the end of this. I don't know if this is a project I will pursue as one of my major projects, but I think it is a cool idea. But I am curious to hear what you think. This is kind of the design process that I go through. I muck something up that's really dodgy looking, really kind of basic, so that I can get to testing. Most of it exists in the head until you play it and then you run through people and explain everything, how everything is supposed to work. They then play the game, and then through multiple iterations of testing and feedback, does it actually become a real game? And that's part of the fun of it, right? It's a lot of testing, it's a lot of thinking, it's a lot of putting it together and problem solving and all this kind of stuff. And then, you know, working with the artists and building out the graphics design and stuff. We kind of skipped a little bit today, but it's something. And it's playable, and I could, you know, print all this out and take it to Tabletop Tuesday and get a look at it and see what's happening. But that, you know, that is kind of it here. If you think this would be a fun game, let me know. Maybe I'll test it out and we'll get to definitively find out if I'm a hack or not. But if you are curious about more game design content like this, I do actually have quite a lot of it on the channel, and I'm going to be starting doing it a bit more now that I've got the new office set up now. I've got a bit more space to do this kind of thing. I'm going to be building more stuff like this with the goal of making board games and game design in general a bit more accessible, a bit more easy to talk about. We're talking about some of the skills that I have and some of the method and how things come together, so that you can check all that out. So if you're interested in that, definitely hit subscribe. Otherwise, I got a whole bunch of other weird stuff in this channel. We play a lot of Clock Tower, we play a lot of other board games and video games, and I made a song based on an Ape Escape soundtrack one time. So there's a lot of weird stuff to check out on the channel. Definitely go and have a look. And hopefully I'll be able to show off maybe this. I'll have this printed out and we can have a look at it sometime. So stick around for that. That could be cool. Maybe, you know. But I'm only going to do it if you click subscribe. If you don't, what was the point? You're not going to be here to see it happen. I'm not going to do it.